need to think more clearly about the consequences of our actions today. The fact of the matter is, Mr. Speaker, there is no reason to rush forward like this, other than the very obvious fact that there are only 7 days left until a new president takes office. But what's worse, as Professor Dershowitz has pointed out, because of the Senate's rules, the case cannot come to trial in the Senate until 1 p.m. on January the 20th, 1 hour after President Trump leaves office. This is an ill-advised course, in my opinion, Mr. Speaker. Even Senator Joe Manchin, a Democrat, agrees. Senator Manchin is quoted this week as having said, quote, "I think this is so ill-advised for Joe Biden to be coming in, trying to heal the country, trying to be the president of all the people when we're going to be so divided and fighting again. Let the judicial system do its job," unquote. So what then is the point of the rush to impeach? We are coming off a horrific event that resulted in 6 deaths. We have an opportunity to move forward, but we cannot if the majority insists on bringing the country through the trauma of another impeachment. It will carry forward into the next president's term, ensuring that he will struggle to organize his administration. What's worse, it will continue to generate the bitterness so many of us have opposed. Why put us through that when we can't actually resolve this before the end of the president's term? Mr. Speaker, I think my colleagues in the majority need to think about this more soberly. We need to recognize we are following a flawed process. We need to recognize that people of goodwill can differ. We need to recognize that while the House may be done with this matter after today's vote, it will not be done for the country, it will not be done for the Senate, and it will not be done for the incoming Biden administration. The House's action today will only extend the division longer than necessary. Finally, Mr. Speaker, I would note that there are other remedies that can be pursued. The President is expected to face litigation over his role in last Wednesday's events. There will be criminal proceedings against the perpetrators, and I hope all of those who stormed the Capitol will be brought to justice. And some members have proposed an alternative procedure, censoring the President, which could garner significant bipartisan support in the House. I do not think impeachment is a wise course, Mr. Speaker. I would urge my friends in the majority to reconsider. There's still time to choose a different path, one that leads to reconciliation and hope for a better and brighter days. With that, I urge opposition to the rule, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Oklahoma reserved. Gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to insert in the record the powerful statement by Congresswoman Liz Cheney, who is the chair of the House Republican Caucus, entitled, "I will vote to impeach the President."
Without objection.
And I just want to be clear about one thing. If we vote to impeach the President today and we send it over to the Senate, there is nothing to prevent the Senate from taking it up immediately if Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell decides that he wants to proceed, number one. Number two, we all want to talk about unity. I can't think of anything that would unify this country more if there was a big bipartisan vote in favor of impeachment. Every second that this President remains in office is a danger to this country and to the world. We have no idea what he is capable of doing, whether he will pardon these terrorists, whether he will go to war. So I would urge all my colleagues on both sides to support this rule and the impeachment resolution. I yield 1 minute to the gentlewoman from California, Ms. Chu.
He's recognized for 1 minute.
Last week, I hid in an office for hours, terrified to open the door because I did not know if a rioter was on the other side ready to attack, kidnap, or murder me. But my experiences were just the tip of the iceberg. The U.S. Capitol was targeted, besieged, and ransacked on January 6 by a murderous mob holding a noose for Vice President Pence and targeting Speaker Pelosi. Their rampage resulted in destruction and 5 people dead. We were attacked by terrorists, but this time the terrorists were radicalized right here in the United States. Worse, they were radicalized by the president, who intentionally lied to his supporters that the election was stolen and then told them when to come to D.C., where to protest, and who to direct their anger at. The need to remove this president could not be more urgent. He is too dangerous to remain in office. Donald Trump must be held accountable. He must be impeached.
Gentlewoman yields. Gentleman from Massachusetts reserves. Gentleman from Oklahoma is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If we defeat the previous question, I'll offer an amendment to the rule to immediately bring up a resolution establishing a bipartisan national commission on the domestic terrorist attack on the United States Capitol. This proposed bipartisan commission will be tasked with examining and reporting upon the terror attack on our Capitol that occurred last Wednesday. The commission will be bipartisan in nature, modeled after the 9/11 Commission, and will fully be empowered to undertake a full investigation and make recommendations to the President and to Congress. I can think of no more appropriate path for Congress to follow than by ensuring a bipartisan commission reviews all evidence and reports back to us on this horrific event. Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to insert the text of my amendment in the record, along with extraneous material, immediately prior to the vote on the previous question. With that, I
Without
urge...
objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With that, I urge a no vote on the previous question. I yield 4 minutes to my good friend, Mr. Davis of Illinois, the ranking Republican member on House Administration, for a further explanation of this amendment.
The gentleman from Illinois is recognized for 4 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I first want to thank the U.S. Capitol Police and the Sergeant-at-Arms employees who were here on the front lines protecting this Capitol last week during the unprecedented attack. It is imperative that we focus on ensuring a safe inauguration day, protecting members and staff during this time of increased threats, and making sure that our Capitol Police officers have the support that they need. We need to ensure that what we saw happen a week ago today never happens again. Yesterday, I introduced, along with Representatives Katko and Comer, a bill that would create a national commission on the domestic terrorist attack upon the United States Capitol. The bipartisan commission would consist of 10 members, 5 Republicans, 5 Democrats, appointed by the next president and by House and Senate leadership. This commission would be tasked with investigating the domestic terrorist attack that occurred in this building just a week ago. And it will provide us recommendations to prevent similar attacks from happening in the future. What we saw last week scared all of us who were here, but it also showed adversaries what it takes to take out a branch of government. When this commission is done with this investigation, it will submit a report to the President and to Congress detailing its findings and recommendations to ensure that no foreign or domestic adversary could accomplish what was done on January 6th. We need to ensure that we fully understand what took place last week and any and all issues that occurred during our response. Republicans and Democrats need to work together. We must unite to prevent any attacks like this from happening in the future, and we must protect this institution, not just for us, for the American people. That's why we should defeat the previous question so that we can establish this bipartisan commission to equip us with the information that we need to support our Capitol Police and the men and women who work in these buildings. And with that, I yield back.
The gentleman yields. The gentleman from Oklahoma reserves. The gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I'm proud to yield 1 minute to the distinguished gentleman from Maryland, the Majority Leader, Mr. Hoyer.
The gentleman from Maryland is recognized for 1 minute.
I thank the chairman of the Rules Committee for yielding. I congratulate him for his efforts and that of the Rules Committee in acting swiftly. I appreciate the remarks of Mr. Cole, for whom I have great respect, but I disagree with his sense of a lack of urgency in action. I do agree with him of the consequences of our action. There are consequences to actions, and the actions of the President of the United States demand urgent, clear action by the Congress of the United States. The chairman of the committee introduced the remarks and put them in the record. But I want to reference the remarks of the chair of the Republican Conference, which is the analog to the Democratic caucus. It is all the Republicans elected to the Congress of the United States in the House of Representatives. And they elected Liz Cheney, the daughter of the Vice President of the United States, the former whip of this House, Dick Cheney, with whom I served in the 80s. Representative Cheney from Wyoming, a conservative Republican, said this: "The President of the United States summoned the mob, assembled the mob, and lit the flame of this attack." That is not some irresponsible new member of the Congress of the United States. This is the daughter of the former Republican whip and former Vice President of the United States of America. She knows of what she speaks. And she said this as well: "There has never been a greater betrayal by a President of the United States of his office and his oath of Constitution, to the Constitution." This is not, as Liz Cheney says, just some action. She characterizes it as the biggest betrayal of any President of the United States in our history. Mr. John Katko, not a backbench Republican who just got here and doesn't know what's going on. Mr. John Katko, who is the ranking Republican on the Homeland Security Committee, says this: "To allow the President of the United States to incite this attack without consequences is a direct threat to the future of democracy." This is not some backbencher on your side of the aisle, on their side of the aisle, Mr. Speaker. It reflects the sense of outrage, the sense of historic dissimilarity from the actions of any previous president. And then Mr. Adam Kinzinger, member to the NG Commerce Committee, a senior member from Illinois. So I have a member from Wyoming, a member from Illinois, and a member from New York. There will be others on this vote who will join them. And Mr. Kinzinger said this: if these actions, he hasn't had any hearings, he doesn't need any long, drawn-out consideration. If these actions are not worthy of impeachment, then what is an impeachable offense? There is no doubt in my mind that the President of the United States broke his oath and incited this insurrection. I tell my friend, Mr. Speaker, a gentleman for whom I have great respect, he is my friend, and I say that honestly, not just as rhetoric, as we say on this floor, because there's some that I don't consider friends, whose values I do not share. That is not Mr. Cole. We have a difference. Liz Cheney, John Katko, Adam Kinzinger, and other Republicans whom I have talked to within the last 24 hours believe this action is required. Now, let me say, I see the gentleman from Ohio is on the floor. He likes to say that we Democrats were elected and the first thing we wanted to do was impeach this president. And he's shaking his head in agreement because, like the President of the United States, he denies the facts. Trump-like. Fake news. December 6, 2017, Mr. Green, who I'm going to refer to, offered a motion because he saw the danger that confronted our country. And he filed a resolution of impeachment. And on December 6, 2017, we had a vote on that. And the majority of Democrats voted no. Actually, they voted yes to table, so that we did not proceed in 2017. The gentleman from Texas, Mr. Green, thought, however, the next year that there was still a danger to our country. Some of us shared that view, but we were not confident that the case could be made or that the transactions that had proceeded would lead to conviction. So on January 19th of 2018, we had a motion to table Mr. Green's resolution. And the majority of Democrats voted to table that resolution. What a rush to judgment. And then on July 17th, 2019, 9 days before the call to Ukraine to get the Ukrainian leader to act on the political behalf of the President of the United States and withheld money to defend the Ukrainian people from Russian involvement and offered that as a bribe. And on July 17th, the majority of Democrats voted to table that resolution. So, Mr. Speaker, there was no rush to judgment. And then that call to which I just referred was on July 26th, 9 days later. I call that the aha moment. Yes, I knew what I thought, but that was proof. And the gentleman, some gentlemen have lamented that we didn't know the whistleblower, because after all, if we knew the whistleblower, we could intimidate everybody else from coming forward. And this president has done everything he can to intimidate whistleblowers, people who came forward and told the truth. And we had witness after witness after witness who confirmed what the whistleblower brought to our attention. So the reason I rise today, and I'm going to speak on the resolution itself at some later time, is to recognize the contributions that Al Green of Texas has made to getting us to this place. And I just want to, I'm not going to read all of the resolution, but I want to read some excerpts from the resolution he has introduced. We won't be considering his resolution. We'll be considering Mr. Cicilline and over 200 others who have signed on to the resolution. Mr. Green had a resolution when introduced, resolved that Donald Trump, President of the United States, is impeached for high crimes and misdemeanors, and the following articles of impeachment be exhibited in the Senate. Article 1 says, in his conduct with the President of the, in his conduct while President of the United States, unmindful of the high duties of his high office and dignity and proprieties thereof, and of the harmony and courtesies necessary for stability, to which my friend spoke, a gentleman from Oklahoma, Donald John Trump, in violation of his constitutional and oath faithfully to execute the office of President, has harmed the society of the United States, brought shame and dishonor to the office of the President of the United States, sowing discord among the people of the United States by weaponizing hate for political gain. He went on to say on January 6, 2021, in a speech at the National Mall, President Donald Trump weaponized the hate that resulted in violence, the deaths of multiple people, an assault on democracy, and an insurrection against the Capitol of the United States of America by inciting a mob. Who said that? Liz Cheney said it, and Al Green said it. Infected with white supremacists, carrying a rebel flag, erecting a gallows structure with a noose, wearing shirts and hateful messages, such as Camp Auschwitz, work brings freedom, and MAGA Civil War, January 6, 2021. MAGA Civil War. They had the hats on of the army of MAGA, which I refer to as Make America Grieve Again. We grieved at Fort Sumter. We grieved on December 7th, 1941, and we grieved on 9/11. And yes, we grieved on January 6th of this year. He goes on to say what the president told this mob that Liz Cheney said was recruited by the president of the United States. And I quote, this is the president talking to this mob. All of us here today do not want to see our election victory stolen by a bold and radical left Democrats, like the Secretary of State in Georgia and the governor of Georgia, which is what they are doing, and stolen by the fake news media, inciting, riling up, creating anger with the fake news and lies that the President of the United States said to these folks. That is what they have done and what they are doing, the President continued. We will never give up. We will never concede. It doesn't happen. You don't concede when there's theft involved. And so what did they do? Incited by this president, as Liz Cheney said, as John Katko said, as Adam Kinzinger said, and frankly, what Secretary Chow acted upon, and what the Secretary of Homeland Security acted upon, and what so many others in the administration have acted upon. Disgusted, dismayed, and disheartened by what their president had done. They got out. They quit. The president further emboldened them, saying, this is the green resolution. We're not considering it, but it is the green resolution. The president further emboldened them, saying, you will never take back our country with weakness. We had a display of non-weakness, criminal, insurrection-like conduct, recruited by and deployed by the President of the United States to come to this Capitol and stop the steal. The steal, of course, was we assembled accepting what all the courts that considered it said was a fair and accurate election of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris as President and Vice President of the United States. After his National Mall speech, a mob of his supporters proceeded to the Capitol complex. We know that. And so Mr. Green's resolution ends with, wherefore, to prevent national harm to our society, Donald John Trump, by such conduct, warrants immediate impeachment trial and removal from office and disqualification to hold and enjoy any office of honor, trust, or profit under the United States Constitution and the 14th Amendment. So in conclusion, Mr. Green is going to speak after me, but in conclusion, Mr. Speaker, let me tell my friend Mr. Cole, I've been here some time. He has as well. I've served with Ronald Reagan, with George H.W. Bush, and George Bush. I had respect for all of those presidents. They cared about our country, they honored our Constitution, and they executed the duties of their office consistent with the Constitution and laws of our country. That is not true of this president. and therefore he ought to be removed. And we have that opportunity to do so. Is there little time left? Yes. But it is never too late to do the right thing. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Maryland yields. Gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Speaker, at this point, I'd like to yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Texas, my good friend, Mr. Green.
Gentleman from Texas is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I had tears to well in my eyes as I heard Mr. Hoyer, and I know that hearts are hurting. It's a very sad time in the history of our country. No one is celebrating. No one wants to see this occur. I was at the Rules Committee by way of Zoom. I was there for the entire hearing. Those members on the other side, this is something that they understand and they take seriously. Regardless as to what's said, I could sense that they're hurting too. So I just want to thank everyone for all that has happened and the appreciation that's been shown. And I want to say that the healing that we talk about, that has to begin. May I have just 30 seconds?
I yield the gentleman 30 seconds.
Gentleman has additional 30 seconds.
Thank you. The healing, it has to start with some of these people who were there initially, who helped to lay this foundation, 110 people. And I want to recognize Maxine Waters, Congresswoman. A lot of them were threatened. Their lives were disrupted. And if I may, with unanimous consent, I'd just like to insert their names in the record.
Without objection.
I thank you, and may God bless our country as we go forward.
Gentleman from Texas yields. Gentleman from Massachusetts reserves. Gentleman from Oklahoma is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I yield 2 minutes to my good friend, distinguished Republican member, our leader of the Budget Committee, Mr. Smith of Missouri.
Gentleman from Missouri is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If we defeat the previous question, we will amend the rule to immediately bring up the bill establishing a bipartisan national commission on the domestic terror attack of the United States Capitol. This has been a devastating week for our nation. Just last week, we stood right here in this very chamber while a violent mob laid siege to the seat of American democracy. It is vital we get the facts on what went wrong last week, why the security apparatus failed, and how we can ensure it never happens again. Less than 50 feet from where we stand in this room, a young lady lost her life through those doors. Through those doors. I was in this chamber when those gunshots rang. That is real stuff. That should never happen in the people's house. For the first time, can the House Democrats and the Speaker of the House put the people before politics? Please put the people before politics. At a time when our nation is more divided than ever before, let's put people before politics. President Trump will be leaving in 7 days. Let's try to heal this nation. Let's listen to the American people. This is the people's house. Let's operate for the people. This country is hurting. The people are hurting. Our colleagues are hurting. This is a reckless impeachment. This will only bring up the hate and fire more than ever before. Have a conscience. Put the people before politics.
Gentleman's time's expired. Gentleman from Oklahoma is recognized. Gentleman from Oklahoma reserves. Gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, let me remind all of my colleagues that what happened on Wednesday would not have happened if it weren't for the occupant in the White House. And if we want to put the people first, we all ought to vote to impeach him and remove him from office as soon as possible. With that, I yield 1 minute to the gentlewoman from California, Ms. Brownlee.
Gentlewoman from California is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, today is a defining moment in our history. Congress was attacked by a mob directed by the President of the United States. It was a horrible, terrifying situation, but we all know deep in our hearts that it could have been much, much worse. We simply cannot let it stand. We cannot let it stand for the very soul of our democracy. We cannot let the President of the United States leave office without acting. We are the oldest constitutional republic in the world, and our Capitol is the sacred symbol of our great democracy. To my colleagues across the aisle, I appeal to your sense of service and duty to our nation and to the oath we all swore to uphold. Before we are Democrats and Republicans, we are Americans. Let us come together to fulfill our oath by voting for the resolution before us and by defending, preserving, and honoring our democracy. I yield back.
The gentlewoman yields. Gentleman from Massachusetts reserves. Gentleman from Oklahoma is recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I yield 2 minutes to one of our new members, distinguished gentlelady from South Carolina, Ms. Mace, and note that this is her first speech on the House floor.
Gentlewoman from South Carolina is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And this is not the reason why I wanted to give my first speech in our chambers, in our hallowed halls. This is not what I wanted to do in my first week in office. But after the violent events of last week, watching and witnessing how heartbreaking this was, thank God I sent my kids home on Monday morning because I was worried about the rhetoric leading up to the events and to the rally on January 6th. The violence that could transpire. Not only were our lives in danger, but if my kids were here, their lives would have been in danger too, the two most precious people in my life. Mr. Speaker, the President of the United States, the U.S. House of Representatives has every right to impeach the President of the United States. But what we're doing today, rushing this impeachment in an hour or 2 hour long debate on the floor of this chamber, bypassing judiciary, poses great questions about the constitutionality of this process. I believe we need to hold the President accountable. I hold him accountable for the events that transpired, for the attack on our Capitol last Wednesday. I also believe that we need to hold accountable every single person, even members of Congress, if they contributed to the violence that transpired here. But today I'm asking my colleagues to remember the words of the legendary, the great leader in this country, Dr. Martin Luther King, who once said, "The time is always right to do what is right." And if we're serious about healing the divisions in this country, Republicans and Democrats need to acknowledge this is not the first day of violence we've seen. We've seen violence across our country for the last 9 months. And we need to recognize, number one, that our words have consequences. That there is violence on both sides of the aisle. We've contributed to it. We need to take responsibility for our words and our actions. We need to acknowledge there is a problem, take responsibility for it, and stop being part of the problem and start being part of the solution. God bless every member in the chamber today, and God bless the United States of America. I yield back. Thank you.
The gentlewoman yields. Gentleman from Oklahoma reserves. Gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I'm happy to yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Vermont, Mr. Welsh.
Gentleman from Vermont is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, our government is founded on the principle all power flows from the people. Donald Trump challenged this principle in 2 ways: deceit and violence. The deceit is repeated and baseless assertion of an electoral fraud. The violence, the attack on the United States Capitol on January 6th. The mob was assembled by Donald Trump, incited by Donald Trump, and in service of Donald Trump's effort to overturn, through violence, what he lost at the voting booth. The violent mob breached the Capitol, killed and injured Capitol Police, destroyed property, threaten the Vice President, members of Congress, and staff, all to obstruct the peaceful transfer of power. If we want unity, we must have accountability. So the question before this Congress, will Congress condone through acquiescence or condemn through impeachment Donald Trump's violent acts to overturn the election?
Gentleman's
Congress
time's
must
expired.
impeach.
Gentleman from Massachusetts
I yield
is
back.
reserved. Gentleman from Oklahoma is recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I yield 2 minutes to the distinguished Republican leader of the Judiciary Committee, Mr. Jordan of Ohio.
Gentleman from Ohio is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank the gentleman for yielding. Mr. Speaker, in his opening remarks, the Democrat chair of the Rules Committee said that Republicans last week voted to overturn the results of an election. Guess who the first objector was on January 6, 2017? First objector, the Democrat chair of the Rules Committee. And guess which state he objected to? Alabama. The very first state called, Alabama. President Trump, I think, won Alabama by like 80 points. Actually, he won it by 30 points. They can object to Alabama in 2017, but tell us we can't object to Pennsylvania in 2021? Pennsylvania, where the state Supreme Court just unilaterally extended the election to Friday? Pennsylvania, where the Secretary of State unilaterally changed the rules, went around the legislature in unconstitutional fashion? Pennsylvania, where county clerks in some counties, and you can imagine which counties they were, let people fix their ballots against the law, cure their ballots, their mail-in ballots, direct violation of the law. And they tell us we tried to overturn the election. Guess who the second objector was in 2017? The individual managing the impeachment for the Democrats. Americans are tired of the double standard. They are so tired of it. Democrats object to more states in 2017 than Republicans did last week, but somehow we're wrong. Democrats can raise bail for rioters and looters this summer, but somehow when Republicans condemn all the violence this summer, the violence last week, somehow we're wrong. And Democrats can investigate the President of the United States, as Mr. Hoyer went through, try to impeach him, investigate him for 4 years, but will not look at an election that 80 million Americans, half the electorate, 80 million, Republicans and Democrats have their doubts about. I said this last night. I do not know where all this goes, and this is frightening for the country. We should defeat this rule, and we should defeat the impeachment resolution when it comes up.
Gentleman's time's expired. Gentleman from Oklahoma reserved. Gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, some of us objected 4 years ago as a protest vote to raise concerns about what all of our intelligence agencies had stated clearly, that Russia interfered in our election. But what the gentleman fails to acknowledge is that we all acknowledge that Donald Trump was the president the day after the election. Hillary Clinton conceded the day after the election. None of us push conspiracy theories like some of my friends on the other side of the aisle have been doing, and this president, that somehow the president won in a landslide. Give me a break. You know, yesterday in the Rules Committee, I asked the gentleman from Ohio if he would just say 5 simple words. And if he was talking about healing. I said the 5 simple words that you could say that would help heal this nation are that the election was not stolen. That's it. 5 simple words. He refused. He said he never said the election was stolen. Well, the evidence shows otherwise. And let me quote from this Dana Milbank piece entitled, "5 Pesky Little Words Keep Stumping Jim Jordan." And Mr. Speaker, the bottom line is this. This Capitol was stormed. People died because of the big lies that were being told by this president and by too many people on the other side of the aisle. Enough. People should be outraged as to what happened. It was unforgivable, unconscionable. And coming up on this floor and talking about whataboutism and trying to make these false equivalencies, give me a break. The President of the United States instigated an attempted coup in this country. People died. Everybody should be outraged, whether you're a Democrat or Republican. If this is not an impeachable offense, I don't know what the hell is. This president is not fit to remain in office. With that, I yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Oregon, Mr. DeFazio.
Gentleman from Oregon is recognized for 1 minute.
I thank the gentleman. This was not a one-off. It was a long time coming. as a part of a plan to perpetuate Trump in office. Trump's campaign strategy was the election, the only way we can lose is if it's stolen. If it's stolen, it's fake, it's stolen, repeated by many of his fellow travelers on that side more than 150 times by Trump over the summer. Then they litigated to disqualify voters. That didn't work. Then they litigated to throw out ballots. Well, that didn't work. Then they attempted to delay the count and flip state legislatures. Well, that didn't work. Last ditch, the president called down to Georgia and said, "Can't you find me more votes?" And then one last desperate plea: stop the January 6th certification. And the president talked about that on September 26th. He said, "You know, if it goes to Congress, there's one vote per state, and we have an advantage." So I think this was part of a plan to disrupt the Electoral College of the United States. Giuliani, trial by combat. Trump, never take back our country with weakness.
Gentleman's time's expired.
You have to show
Gentleman
strength.
from Massachusetts
You have to be strong.
reserves.
If you
The
don't fight
gentleman
like
from
hell, you're not gonna
Oklahoma
have a
is
country
recognized. The
anymore.
gentleman will
And then
suspend.
he said, "We love
The gentleman is no longer recognized. Gentleman from Oklahoma is recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I yield 3 minutes to my good friend, the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Reschenthaler, new member of the Rules Committee.
Gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm deeply troubled by last week's attack on our Capitol, and I pray for the families of Officer Sicknick and Officer Liebengood. As I have been saying all summer long, violence and rioting has no place in America, and the criminals responsible for last week's rioting must be brought to justice. At a time when our nation is still healing, we must seek out issues to work on that unite us, rather than issues that further divide us. I was greatly encouraged to see our country unite in condemnation of last week's lawlessness and the rioting. I am further encouraged that despite my Democrat colleagues' claims to the contrary, President Trump is committed to a peaceful and uninterrupted transfer of power. But that's not good enough for my colleagues across the aisle. With just 7 days left in President Trump's term, they are fast-tracking impeachment proceedings, a move which will no doubt further divide an already fractured nation. Even House Democrats' last impeachment effort, which was rushed through in record time, at the very least that had expert input, depositions, hearings, and deliberation. This latest attempt at impeachment ignores all precedent and ignores all due process. And it cannot be voted on in the Senate before Joe Biden is sworn into office. I'm also very concerned by the charge against the president of quote-unquote incitement of insurrection. At his rally, President Trump urged attendees to quote-unquote peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard. There was no mention of violence, let alone calls to action. Look, I prosecuted terrorists in the Navy. I was a defense attorney in the Navy JAG Corps. I was a district judge. Just pull up the criminal statute. Look at the criminal code. President Trump's words would not even meet the definition of incitement under criminal statutes. The measure before us today sets a dangerous precedent whereby political parties can justify impeachment simply because they do not agree with the president. I would therefore urge my colleagues across the aisle to just take a step back, let cooler heads prevail, and consider how the actions we're taking here today will alter the course of history, will lower an already low bar of impeachment for all future presidencies. Thank you, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields. Gentleman from Oklahoma reserves. Gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, when my friends talk about the president being committed to a peaceful transition, I just point to what happened on Wednesday when his words launched a violent attack against this Capitol, where 5 people lost their lives and many more were injured. So give me a break. Mr. Speaker, I yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Texas, Ms. Jackson-Lee.
I thank you. Contrary to my good friend's words, the President of the United States is an insurrectionist. He led an insurrection against the United States of America. Prior to the January 6th attack by violent domestic terrorists, the President spoke to the crowd for 1 hour, and these were his words. These were his words, which is that we cannot take the nation back. We have to take the nation back with strength, and you must go and do that. Those were the paraphrase of his words. The president provoked these domestic terrorists with words, with actions, and conduct that portray and have contempt and hostility to the national value of equal justice under the law, telling domestic terrorists, nearly all of them were white supremacists, many of them who support him politically, who stormed the Capitol to derail Congress from completing its constitutionally required duty of counting and verifying the votes.
Gentlewoman's time has expired. Gentleman from Massachusetts reserves. The gentleman from Oklahoma is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I yield 1 minute to my very good friend, the distinguished member of Georgia, Mr. Carter.
Gentleman from Georgia is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise today in opposition to this effort to move forward with impeachment hearings. What happened on Wednesday, January 6th, was nothing short of pure anarchy. And those individuals who broke the law should be held accountable for their actions. They should be prosecuted to the highest extent of the law, and they should be put in jail. This was one of the saddest days of my life last Wednesday, Mr. Chairman. Our thoughts and our prayers are with the police officers and other law enforcement who carried out their duties on that tragic day, including Officers Sicknick and Liebengood. Right now, our focus should be on healing our nation. With so many upset and dismayed at the actions of last week, it's our responsibility to chart a path forward to subdue the growing animosity and find ways to heal our country. Unfortunately, I don't believe this resolution will achieve those goals, especially 7 days ahead of the inauguration. This is very serious and concerning effort during such a tense and fragile time in our country. I urge my colleagues to consider how this will further entrench people during such a tense time. I cannot support this.
The gentleman will suspend. All members are reminded to wear face coverings while on the floor. All members and staff should be wearing face coverings while on the floor. Gentleman yields. Gentleman from Oklahoma reserves. Gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 1.5 minutes to the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Doggett.
Gentleman from Texas is recognized for 1.5 minutes.
For years, Donald Trump has honored thugs worldwide who suppress democracy. For months, with a daily diet of lies, he has made clear his refusal to accept any election in which he was not the winner. After failing completely in his repeated attempts to intimidate both Republican election officials into committing fraud and Republican-appointed judges into ignoring our Constitution, he made a desperate attempt last week to block the final election count and prevent the peaceful transition of power essential to democracy. Trump basically attempted to overthrow the government, to violently overthrow the first branch of government, this Congress. Like his deadly reaction to the pandemic, he totally bungled the deadly attack. Both his frenzied, riotous mob and his congressional enablers were defeated. America, we did stop the steal. We stopped Donald Trump from stealing our democracy and imposing himself as a tyrant. Today, we not only demand accountability for his gross misconduct, but more importantly, we declare to the next Trump-like aspiring tyrant, not in America, we love our democracy too much. Our capital is scarred, but our democracy survives. Violating his sworn duty to protect and defend our Constitution by seeking to violently overthrow the government.
Gentleman's time's expired. Gentleman from Massachusetts
if this is
reserves.
Not impeachable,
the gentleman
nothing
from
is.
Oklahoma is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I advise the chair I have additional speakers on the way, but they're having a difficult time, so I will reserve my time.
Gentleman from Oklahoma reserved. Gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 1 minute to the gentlewoman from Connecticut, Ms. DeLauro.
Gentlewoman from Connecticut is recognized for 1 minute.
Just 1 second.
On November 3rd, the American people voted overwhelmingly for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris to serve as President and Vice President of the United States. The country was about to enter a new era with great hope for change. And yet, with a decisive mandate and majority, the President used untruthful claims to end the completion of a constitutional process of collecting the electoral votes, making Joe Biden President of the United States. Not accepting the will of the American people, the President unleashed the most horrific violence that overwhelmed the security forces at this Capitol, which was overrun for the first time since 1812, putting the lives of so many at risk. Indeed, a day of infamy. This impeachment will be viewed as a transcendent vote where all will be judged. Vote to impeach the President of the United States, Donald J. Trump. And I yield back.
Gentlewoman yields. Gentleman from Massachusetts reserved. Gentleman from Oklahoma is
I
recognized.
continue to reserve, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman from Oklahoma reserved. From Massachusetts is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 1 minute to the gentlewoman from Florida, Ms. Castor.
The gentlewoman from Florida is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to urge the impeachment of Donald Trump because the attack on the Capitol and the Congress was the single most depraved betrayal of the U.S. Constitution ever committed by a president. The traitorous incitement of an insurrection demands not just impeachment, but removal of office from office immediately. Violence during the transfer of power, Confederate flags, anti-Semitic paraphernalia desecrated this Capitol. So accountability must come swiftly. We must act with the same resoluteness we showed in the early morning hours after the insurrection, where we ensured the will of the voters was effectuated. Donald Trump's defilement of this Capitol will not stand. It demands impeachment now. I yield back.
Gentlewoman yields. Gentleman from Massachusetts reserved. Gentleman from Oklahoma is recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I yield 1 minute to my very good friend, distinguished gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Bishop.
Gentleman from North Carolina.
Excuse me, 2 minutes, Mr. Speaker.
For 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the gentleman for yielding. These articles charge incitement. Once before, the House impeached a president of the United States within a week of the alleged offense. That was President Andrew Johnson, days after he removed Secretary of War Edwin Stanton in 1868. Over 50 years later, the Supreme Court declared unconstitutional the Tenure of Office Act that President Johnson had refused to obey. In other words, the House was not only hasty, it was wrong, punishing noncompliance with an unconstitutional law. At least when that occurred, the constitutionality of the law in question was unsettled. Here, however, an angry House majority races to impeachment in direct violation of settled constitutional law. Again, the articles before the House charge incitement to insurrection. They do not specify inciting language. The law is well settled. Quote, "What is required to forfeit constitutional protection is incitement speech that specifically advocates for listeners to take unlawful action." The violence last Wednesday was abhorrent. Perpetrators should be prosecuted. Those responsible for security decisions held accountable. Congress can disapprove, revile, condemn, even censure, but you cannot, consistent with the rule of law, punish that which the Constitution's First Amendment declares protected. If you do it, the violators of duty to this Constitution, however angry, will be those who vote for this article of impeachment. It is not Mr. Green's article of impeachment. It is incitement. And the Constitution is settled on that point. Thank you. I yield back.
Gentleman from Oklahoma reserves. Gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I'm proud to yield 1.5 minutes to the gentlewoman from Minnesota, Ms. Omar.
Gentlewoman from Minnesota is recognized for 1.5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Speaker, let us not mince words about what happened last week. It was a violent attempt to interrupt our democratic process. It was a targeted blow at the most essential process that makes us a democracy. It was a direct and specifically incited by the President of the United States. For years, we have been asked to turn a blind eye to the criminality, corruption, and blatant disregard to the rule of law by the tyrant president we have in the White House. We as a nation can no longer look away. the president not only incited an insurrection against our government, but has in word and deed led a rebellion. We cannot simply move past this or turn the page. For us to be able to survive as a functioning democracy, there has to be accountability. We must impeach and remove this president from the office immediately so that he cannot be a threat to our democracy. I stand ready to fulfill my oath of office. And I challenge my colleagues on the other side of the aisle to do the same. I yield back.
Gentlewoman yields. Gentleman from Massachusetts reserved. Gentleman from Oklahoma is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We continue to reserve.
Gentleman from Oklahoma reserved. Gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to ask unanimous consent to insert into the record a New York Times article published January 9th entitled, "Our President Wants Us Here, the Mob That Stormed the Capitol." It's another example of why our country cannot risk even one more day of Donald Trump.
Without objection.
I now yield 1 minute to the gentleman from California, Mr. Correa.
Gentleman from California is recognized for 1 minute.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. And, Mr. Speaker, last week, Congress was under siege by a mob, motivated and directed by the President of the United States. Our Vice President was the target of that mob. Members of Congress, both Democrats and Republicans, were targets of this mob. And I witnessed, for the first time in my life, Americans fighting Americans, all at the behest of our own President of the United States. And as Americans, we can do better. And I will vote for impeachment today for our nation, for our children, and for our grandchildren. And I'll be voting for impeachment so that America will once again be the shining city upon the hill whose beacon light guides freedom-loving people everywhere. I urge my colleagues to join me and vote for impeachment. With that, I yield.
The gentleman yields. Gentleman from Massachusetts reserves. Gentleman from Oklahoma is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I continue to reserve.
Gentleman from Oklahoma reserved. Gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
May I ask the gentleman how many more speakers he may have?
Whenever the gentleman is prepared to close, we'll close. We were hopeful that one of our speakers could arrive, but difficult circumstances, they're just having a hard time getting here.
I think we have exhausted all of our speakers, so I'll yield to the gentleman.
Is my friend prepared to close?
Yes.
Then I'll close, Mr.
Gentleman from Oklahoma is recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I yield myself the balance of my time. Speaker, I want to thank you for presiding over these difficult proceedings today. I want to thank my good friend, the distinguished chairman of the Rules Committee, and I want to thank everybody that came to the floor, had something to say at an important moment. And I think the debate, while spirited, reflected the civility and decency of the institution that we're all privileged to be part of. And I'm very proud to have been part of it, very proud of all the members and the manner in which they participated. I want again to thank the staff and thank those who kept us safe in the process, particularly the Capitol Police. Mr. Speaker, in closing, I oppose this rule and I oppose the majority's actions today. After the traumatic events of last week, the majority should be taking steps to unite us. Instead, they are only dividing us further. They are rushing to judgment, in my opinion, and bringing up impeachment after failing to follow any meaningful process whatsoever. No hearings have been held, no witnesses heard, no process or opportunity to respond was provided to the President. No members had an opportunity to review or amend this article before it came to the floor. This is hardly the way the House should undertake such a serious act. Mr. Speaker, there's still a way to unite the country. Let us look forward, not backward. Let us come together, not apart. Let us celebrate the peaceful transition of power to a new president rather than impeaching an old president. And let us affirm and reaffirm with one united voice that the House does not rush to judgment on the most consequential action we can take. We deserve better than that, Mr. Speaker, and the American people deserve better than that. Mr. Speaker, I urge my colleagues, as they reflect on this minute and we move into our next stage of debate, to remember that we're all privileged to represent a great and a good people. who've gone through a horrifying and tragic time, and that we owe them the opportunity to reflect, and we owe them our best efforts to bring together. I know people on this floor feel very passionately about this subject with different points of view. I honor each one of those points of view, and I honor the people that voice them. And let's remember when we're through this that we're one people, that we have one purpose, that we're free through the grace of God and millions of brave Americans over centuries of time, and we will remain that way, and we will move forward together once we settle this debate. With that, Mr. Speaker, I urge my colleagues to vote no on the previous question, no on the rule, no on the underlying measure, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back the balance of his time. The gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and let me thank my friend, the ranking member of the Rules Committee, Mr. Cole, for his friendship and for the way he conducts himself in this chamber. I know he has great respect for this institution. Mr. Speaker, it is impossible for me to fully capture the reverence that I have for the United States Capitol. You know, I worked on these grounds starting back when I was a college intern working for Senator George McGovern back in 1977. No relation. Great last name. But since that time, I have done everything from working as a staffer for Congressman Joe Moakley of Massachusetts to being elected to the United States House of Representatives myself. But that internship will always be a high point of my life. Coming here for the first time, walking these hallowed halls, and seeing the glory of American democracy up close. The idea that someone would incite an out-of-control mob of homegrown fascists and domestic terrorists to desecrate the People's House fills me with a deep sadness for our country. The contempt that these people had for our democracy and our freedom fills me with horror. And what Donald Trump did, encouraging them, fills me with rage. Rage, not just on behalf of all of those serving here, but all of those who work in these halls. And I'm talking about the reporters, the cafeteria workers, the custodians, the clerks, the parliamentarians. I go on and on and on. And the staff, the Democratic staff, the Republican staff, the nonpartisan support staff, who were terrorized, some hiding under their desks and barricading in their offices. I was in the Speaker's chair the day this unfolded, and many of the people who are sitting up there now were present at that time. What a horrifying thing for anybody to have to experience. Now, some of my Republican friends have been trying to lecture us about unity here today. Unity, after they voted to overturn a free and fair election in the United States of America, but also preaching unity and not acknowledging that for 4 years, many of them gave oxygen to Donald Trump's conspiracy theories, to the big lies. They turned the other way in the face of racism and bigotry and how he embraced some of the most intolerant voices in this country. They just let it go. You know, I will remind everybody here that words have consequences. And ignoring words that are wrong also have consequences. You know, what happened would never have happened if everybody stood up in unity and called out the president when he was not telling the American people the truth, when he was pushing a big lie. We will never have unity without truth and also without accountability. This week in Congress, we saw the best of us and the worst of us. Some of my colleagues have shown that they will defend this president no matter what he does. There's nothing that he could do that would dissuade them from all-out support. But some are standing up and doing the right thing under tremendous pressure, and I am proud of that, and I honor them for their courage. This impeachment resolution outlines the truth of what Trump did. It is time that this Congress now holds him accountable for his words and for their devastating impact. Last week, we took an oath to protect this nation. As history calls on us today, I pray that we all have the moral clarity to uphold it here today. With that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back the balance of my time, and I move the previous question on the resolution.
The question is on order in the previous question on the resolution. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no.
No.
In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, on that I would request the yeas and nays.
Pursuant to Section 3S of House Resolution 8, the yeas and nays are ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. Indiana. For what purpose does the gentleman from Indiana seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Baird of Indiana, pursuant to H-Res 8, I inform the House that Mr. Baird will vote no on Rep. McGovern motion to move the previous question on H-Res 41.
The gentleman from California seek recognition.
As the member designated by Mr. Vella pursuant to H-Res 8, I inform the House that Mr. Vella will vote aye on ordering the previous question.
You know, that qualification for what purpose does the gentlewoman from Illinois seek recognition?
As a member designated by Mr. Carson pursuant to H-Res 8, I inform the House that Mr. Carson will vote yes on ordering the previous question.
What do we have over here? For what purpose does the gentleman from Tennessee seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Fleischman of Tennessee pursuant to H-Res 8, I inform the House that Mr. Fleischman will vote nay on the Representative McGovern motion to move the previous question on H-Res 41. As the member designated by Mr. Desjardins of Tennessee pursuant to H-Res 8, I inform the House that Mr. Desjardins will vote nay on the Representative McGovern motion to move the previous question on HRES 41.
Kansas. For what purpose does the gentleman from Kansas seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. LaTurner of Kansas pursuant to House Resolution 8, I inform the House that Mr. LaTurner will vote nay on the Rep. McGovern motion to move the previous question on House Resolution 41.
Okay.
Yeah. For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition? I'm sorry.
Mr. Speaker, as the member designated by Ms. Fletcher, pursuant to HRES 8, I inform the House that Ms. Fletcher will vote yes on ordering the previous question.
Virginia. For what purpose does the gentleman from Virginia seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Trone, pursuant to HRES 8, I inform the House that Mr. Trone will vote yes on ordering the previous question. As the member designated by Mr. Blumenauer, pursuant to HRES 8, I inform the House that Mr. Blumenauer will vote yes on ordering the previous question. As the member designated by Mr. Peters, pursuant to HRES 8, I inform the House that Mr. Peters will vote yes on ordering the previous question. As the member designated by Dr. Lowenthal, pursuant to HRES 8, I inform the House that Mr. Lowenthal will vote yes on ordering the previous question. As the member designated by Mr. Liu, pursuant to HRES 8, I inform the House that Mr. Liu will vote yes on ordering the previous question.
For what purpose does the gentleman from New York seek recognition?
As the member designated by Chairwoman Eddie Bernice Johnson, pursuant to HRES 8, I inform the House that Chairwoman Johnson will vote yea on the previous question. As the member designated by Congressman Brendan Boyle, pursuant to HRES 8, I inform the House that Congressman Boyle will vote yea on the previous question.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Connecticut seek recognition?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Adam Smith of Washington State, pursuant to House Resolution 8, I inform the House that Mr. Smith will vote yes on ordering the previous question.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Arizona seek recognition?
As a member designated by Representative Kirkpatrick, pursuant to H.R. 8, I inform the House Representative Kirkpatrick will vote aye on ordering the previous question. As a member designated by Representative Cardenas, pursuant to H.R. 8, I inform the House that Representative Cardenas will vote aye on ordering the previous question.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Illinois seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as a member designated by Mr. Grijalva of Arizona, pursuant to HRES 8, I inform the House that Mr. Grijalva will vote yes on ordering the previous question, and as the member designated by Ms. Presley of Massachusetts, pursuant to HRES 8, I inform the House that Ms. Presley will vote yea on ordering the previous question.
Recognition.
Mr. Speaker, as a member designated by Mr. Lawson of Florida 5th Congressional District, pursuant to House Resolution 8, I inform the House that Mr. Lawson will vote yes on the motion ordering the previous question on the rule.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Washington seek recognition?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As the member designated by Ms. Strickland of Washington pursuant to H-Res 8, I inform the House that Ms. Strickland will vote yes on ordering the previous question.
You said 10. For what purpose does the gentleman from Michigan seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Bergman, pursuant to House Resolution 8, I inform the House that Mr. Bergman will vote no on ordering the previous question. Mr. Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Lamborn, pursuant to House Resolution 8, I inform the House that Mr. Lamborn will vote no on ordering the previous question.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from New Jersey seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Schneider pursuant to H-Res 8, I inform the House that Mr. Schneider will vote yes on ordering the previous question.
Tell him from the chair.
Mr. Brown,
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Maine seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as the member designated by Ms. Custer of New Hampshire pursuant to H-Res 8, I will inform the House that Ms. Custer will vote yea on ordering the previous question.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Nebraska seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as a member designated by Mr. Bill Raucus of Florida, pursuant to H-Res 8, I inform the House that Mr. Bill Raucus will vote nay on the Representative McGovern motion to move the previous question on H-Res 4-1.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from California seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as a member designated by Mr. DeSaulnier pursuant to H-Res 8, I inform the House that Mr. DeSaulnier will vote yes on ordering the previous question.
California seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as member designated by Congressmember Napolitano, pursuant to House Resolution 8, I inform the House that Congressmember Napolitano will vote yes on ordering the previous question. And Mr. Speaker, as member designated by Congressmember Costa, pursuant to House Resolution 8, I inform the House that Congressmember Costa will also vote yes on the previous question.
does the gentleman from Maryland seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Ms. Alma Adams, pursuant to House Resolution 8, I inform the House that Ms. Adams will vote yes on ordering the previous question.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from New York seek recognition?
Ms. Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Young of Alaska pursuant to House Resolution 8, I inform the House that Mr. Young will vote nay on the motion to move the previous question on House Resolution 41. Thank you.
Purpose does the gentlewoman from Michigan seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Ms. Lee of Nevada pursuant to H-Res 8, I will inform the House that Ms. Lee will vote yea on ordering the previous question. As the member designated by Mrs. Dingle pursuant to H-Res 8, I will inform the House that Mrs. Dingle will vote yea on ordering the previous question. As the member designated by Ms. Axney pursuant to H-Res 8, I inform the House that Ms. Axney will vote yea on ordering the previous question. As the member designated by Ms. Capter pursuant to H-Res 8, I will inform the House that Ms. Capter will vote yea on ordering the previous question.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Connecticut seek recognition?
As the member designated by Ms. Wilson pursuant to H-Res 8, I inform the House that Ms. Wilson will vote yes on ordering the previous question.
Purpose does the gentlewoman from Massachusetts seek recognition?
As the member designated by Ms. Frankel pursuant to H-Res 8, I inform the House that Ms. Frankel will vote yes on ordering the previous question. As the member designated by Ms. Bonamici pursuant to H-Res 8, I inform the House that Ms. Bonamici will vote yes on ordering the previous question.
What purpose does the gentlewoman from Florida seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Buchanan of the state of Florida pursuant to H-Res 8, I inform the House that Mr. Buchanan will vote nay on the Rep. McGovern motion to move the previous question on H-Res 41. As the member designated by Mr. Dunn of the state of Florida pursuant to H-Res 8, I inform the House that Mr. Dunn will vote nay on the Rep. McGovern motion to move the previous question on H-Res 41.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Virginia seek recognition?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As the member designated by Mr. McEachin pursuant to H-Res 8, I inform the House that Mr. McEachin will vote yes on ordering the previous question. And as the member designated by Ms. Porter pursuant to H-Res 8, I inform the House that Ms. Porter will vote yes on ordering the previous question.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Michigan seek recognition?
As the member designated by Ms. Ocasio-Cortez pursuant to H-Res 8, I inform the House that Ms. Ocasio-Cortez will vote yes on ordering the previous question.
Purpose does the gentleman from New Jersey seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Ms. Bonnie Watson Coleman pursuant to H-Res 8, I inform the House that Ms. Bonnie Watson Coleman will vote yes on ordering the previous question. And as the member designated by Mr. Bill Pascrell pursuant to H-Res 8, I inform the House that Mr. Pascrell will vote yes on ordering the previous question. And as the member designated by Mr. Albio Series pursuant to H-Res 8, I inform the House that Mr. Series will vote yes on ordering the previous question. And finally, Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Paul Tonko pursuant to H-Res 8, I inform the House that Mr. Tonko will vote yes on ordering the previous question.
For what purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Representative Jerry McNerney pursuant to H-Res 8, I inform the House that Mr. McNerney will vote yes on ordering the previous question.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from New York seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Deutsch of Florida pursuant to H-Res 8, I inform the House that Mr. Deutsch will vote yes on ordering the previous question.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Indiana seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, as the member designated for Ms. Walorski pursuant to H-Res 8, I inform the House that Ms. Walorski will vote nay on the motion to move the previous question on H-Res 41.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Virginia seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Ms. Titus of Nevada, pursuant to H-Res 8, I inform the House that Ms. Titus will vote yes on ordering the previous question.
The gentleman from Pennsylvania seek recognition.
Good morning, Madam Speaker. As a member designated by Mr. Doyle of Pennsylvania pursuant to House Resolution 8, I hereby inform the House that Mr. Doyle will vote yes on ordering the previous question.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Florida seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Payne of New Jersey pursuant to H-Res 8, I inform the House that Mr. Payne will vote yea on ordering the previous question. And Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Hastings of Florida pursuant to H-Res 8, I inform the House that Mr. Hastings will also vote yea on ordering the previous question.
For what purpose?
Oh, we are?
Purpose does the gentleman from Maryland seek recognition?
As the member designated by Ms. Jayapal pursuant to House Resolution 8, I rise to announce that Ms. Jayapal will vote aye on ordering the previous question.
I forgot we were doing proxy voting.
On this vote, the yeas are 221, the nays are 205. The previous question is ordered. The question is on the adoption of the resolution. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the yeas have it. Gentleman from Oklahoma.
Madam Speaker, on that I would request the yeas and nays.
Pursuant to Section 3S of House Resolution 8, the yeas and nays are ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. For what purpose does the gentleman from Pennsylvania seek recognition?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As a member designated by Mr. Doyle of Pennsylvania, pursuant to House Resolution 8, I hereby inform the House that Mr. Doyle will vote yes on House Resolution 41.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Michigan seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Bergman, pursuant to House Resolution 8, I inform the House that Mr. Bergman will vote no on the rule H-Res 41. Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Lamborn, pursuant to House Resolution 8, I inform the House that Mr. Lamborn will vote no on the rule H-Res 41.
Does the gentlewoman from Florida seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Payne of New Jersey, pursuant to H-Res 8, I inform the House that Mr. Payne will vote yea on H-Res 41. And Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Hastings of Florida, pursuant to H-Res 8, I inform the House that Mr. Hastings will also vote yea on H-Res 41.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Massachusetts seek recognition?
As the member designated by Ms. Frankel pursuant to H-Res 8, I inform the House that Ms. Frankel will vote yes on H-Res 41. As the member designated by Ms. Bonamici pursuant to H-Res 8, I inform the House that Ms. Bonamici will vote yes on H-Res 41.
For what purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Congressman Jerry McNerney pursuant to H-Res 8, I inform the House that Mr. McNerney will vote yes on H-Res 41.
The gentleman from Illinois seek recognition.
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Ms. Presley of Massachusetts pursuant to House Res 8, I inform the House that Ms. Presley will vote yea on House Resolution 41.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Indiana seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, as a member designated by Ms. Walorski pursuant to H. Res. 8, I inform the House that Ms. Walorski will vote nay on H. Res. 41.
Purpose, the gentleman from Texas seek recognition.
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Ms. Fletcher pursuant to H. Res. 8, I inform the House that Ms. Fletcher will vote yes on H. Res. 41.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from New York seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Young of Alaska pursuant to House Resolution 8, I inform the House that Mr. Young will vote nay on the rule of House Resolution 24. Thank you.
For what purpose does the gentleman from New York seek recognition?
As the member designated by Chairwoman Eddie Bernice Johnson pursuant to H. Res. 8, I inform the House that Chairwoman Johnson will vote yea on H. Res. 41. As the member designated by Congressman Brendan Boyle pursuant to H. Res. 8, I inform the House that Congressman Boyle will vote yea on H. Res. 41.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Maryland seek recognition?
As the member designated by Ms. Jayapal pursuant to House Resolution 8, I inform the House that Ms. Jayapal votes aye on H. Res. 41.
Purpose does the gentleman from Indiana seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Baird of Indiana pursuant to H. Res. 8, I inform the House that Mr. Baird will vote no on H. Res. 41.
Mr. California. For what purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, as member designated by Congressmember Napolitano, pursuant to House Resolution 8, I inform the body that Congressmember Napolitano will vote yes on H. Res. 41. And Madam Speaker, as member designated by Congressmember Costa, pursuant to House Resolution 8, I inform the body that Congressmember Costa will also vote aye on H. Res. 41.
For what purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition?
As the member designated by Mr. Villa pursuant to H. Res. 8, I inform the House that Mr. Villa will vote aye on H. Res. 41.
What purpose does the gentlelady from Florida seek recognition?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As the member designated by Mr. Dunn of the state of Florida pursuant to H-Res 8, I inform the House that Mr. Dunn will vote nay on H-Res 41. As the member designated by Mr. Buchanan of the state of Florida pursuant to H-Res 8, I inform the House that Mr. Buchanan will vote nay on H-Res 41.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Arizona seek recognition?
As a member designated by Representative Kirkpatrick pursuant to H.R. 8, I inform the House Representative Kirkpatrick will vote aye on H.R. 41. As the member designated by Representative Cardenas to H.R. 8, I inform the House Representative Cardenas will vote aye on H.R. 41.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Kansas seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, as a member designated by Mr. LaTurner from Kansas, pursuant to House Resolution 8, I inform the House that Mr. LaTurner will vote nay on House Resolution 41.
For what purpose does the gentlelady from Maine seek recognition?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Ms. Custer of New Hampshire pursuant to H-Res 8, I inform the House that Ms. Custer will vote yea on H-Res 41.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Virginia seek
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Ms. Titus of Nevada, pursuant to H-Res 8, I inform the House that Ms. Titus will vote yes on H-Res 41.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Michigan seek recognition?
As the member designated by Ms. Lee of Nevada pursuant to H-Res 8, I inform the House that Ms. Lee will vote yea on H-Res 41. As the member designated by Mrs. Dingle pursuant to H-Res 8, I inform the House that Mrs. Dingle will vote yea on H-Res 41. As the member designated by Ms. Axney pursuant to H-Res 8, I inform the House that Ms. Axney will vote yea on H-Res 41. As the member designated by Ms. Capter pursuant to H-Res 8, I inform the House that Ms. Capter will vote yea on H-Res 41.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Connecticut seek recognition?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Adam Smith of Washington State pursuant to H-Res 8, I inform the House that Mr. Smith will vote yes on House Resolution 41.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Tennessee seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Fleischman of Tennessee pursuant to H-Res 8, I inform the House that Mr. Fleischman will vote nay on H-Res 41. As the member designated by Mr. Desjardins of Tennessee pursuant to H-Res 8, I inform the House that Mr. Desjardins will vote nay on H-Res 41. Thank you.
For what purpose does the gentleman from New Jersey seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Ms. Bonnie Watson Coleman pursuant to H-Res 8, I inform the House that Ms. Watson Coleman will vote yes on H-Res 41. And as the member designated by Mr. Albio Series pursuant to H-Res 8, I inform the House that Mr. Series will vote yes on H-Res 41. As the member designated by Mr. Bill Pascrell pursuant to H-Res 8, I inform the House that Mr. Pascrell will vote yes on H-Res 41. And finally, Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Paul Tonko pursuant to H-Res 8, I inform the House that Mr. Tonko will vote yes on H-Res 41.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Virginia seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Blumenauer pursuant to H.R.S. 8, I inform the House that Mr. Blumenauer will vote yes on H.R.S. 41. As the member designated by Mr. Liu pursuant to H.R.S. 8, I inform the House that Mr. Liu will vote yes on H.R.S. 41. As the member designated by Mr. Lowenthal pursuant to H.R.S. 8, I inform the House that Mr. Lowenthal will vote yes on H.R.S. 41. As the member designated by Mr. Peters pursuant to H.R.S. 8, I inform the House that Mr. Peters will vote yes on H.R.S. 41. As the member designated by Mr. Trone pursuant to H.R.S. 8, I inform the House that Mr. Trone will vote yes on H.R.S. 41.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from California seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, as a member designated by Mr. Desagne pursuant to H-Res 8, I inform the House that Mr. Desagne will vote yes on H-Res 41.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Pennsylvania seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Lawson of Florida 5th Congressional District, pursuant to House Resolution 8, I inform the House that Mr. Lawson will vote yea on H.R. Resolution 41.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from New Jersey seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Schneider pursuant to H-Res 8, I inform the House that Mr. Schneider will vote yes on H-Res 41.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Washington seek recognition?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As the member designated by Ms. Strickland of Washington pursuant to H-Res 8, I inform the House that Ms. Strickland will vote yes on H-Res 41.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from New York seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Deutsch of Florida pursuant to H-Res 8, I inform the House that Mr. Deutsch will vote yes on H-Res 41.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Connecticut seek recognition?
As the member designated by Ms. Wilson pursuant to H. Res. 8, I inform the House that Ms. Wilson will vote yes on H. Res. 41.
Does the gentleman from Nebraska seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Bill Rackus of Florida, pursuant to H. Res. 8, I inform the House that Mr. Bill Rackus will vote nay on H. Res. 41.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Virginia seek recognition?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As the member designated by Mr. McEachin pursuant to H. Res. 8, I inform the House that Mr. McEachin will vote yes on H. Res. 41. And as the member designated by Ms. Porter pursuant to H. Res. 8, I inform the House that Ms. Porter will vote yes on H. Res. 41.
For what purpose does the gentlelady from Michigan seek recognition?
As the member designated by Ms. Ocasio-Cortez pursuant to House Res. 8, I inform the House that Ms. Ocasio-Cortez will vote yes on House Res. 41.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Illinois seek recognition?
As a member designated by Mr. Carson pursuant to H-Res 8, I inform the House that Mr. Carson will vote yes on H-Res 41.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Maryland seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, as a member designated by Ms. Alma Adams of North Carolina, pursuant to House Resolution 8, I inform the House that Ms. Adams will vote yes on H.Res. 41.
The yeas are 221, the nays are 203. The resolution is adopted. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table.
Does the gentleman from New York, Mr. Nadler, seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, pursuant to House Resolution 41, I call up House Resolution 24 and ask for its immediate consideration in the House.
The clerk will report the resolution.
House Resolution 24, resolved that Donald John Trump, President of the United States, is impeached for high crimes and misdemeanors, and that the following article of impeachment be exhibited to the United States Senate. Article of impeachment exhibited by the House of Representatives of the United States of America in the name of itself and of the people of the United States of America against Donald John Trump, President of the United States of America, in maintenance and support of its impeachment against him for high crimes and misdemeanors. Article 1, incitement of insurrection. The Constitution provides that the House of Representatives shall have the sole power of impeachment, and that the President shall be removed from office on impeachment for and conviction of treason, bribery, or other crimes and misdemeanors. Further, Section 3 of the 14th Amendment to the Constitution prohibits any person who has engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the United States from holding any office under the United States in his conduct while President of the United States, and in violation of his constitutional oath faithfully to execute the office of the President of the United States, and to the best of his ability preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States, and in violation of his constitutional duty to take care that the laws be faithfully executed, Donald John Trump engaged in high crimes and misdemeanors by inciting violence against the government of the United States, and that on January 6, 2021, pursuant to the 12th Amendment to the Constitution of the United States, the Vice President of the United States, the House of Representatives, and the Senate met at the United States Capitol for a joint session of Congress to count the votes of the Electoral College. In the months preceding the joint session, President Trump repeatedly issued false statements asserting that the presidential election results were the product of widespread fraud and should not be accepted by the American people or certified by state or federal officials. Shortly before the joint session commenced, President Trump addressed a crowd at the Ellipse in Washington, D.C. There, he reiterated false claims that we won this election and we won it by a landslide. He also willfully made statements that, in context, encouraged and foreseeably resulted in lawless action at the Capitol, such as, if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore. Thus incited by President Trump, members of the crowd he had addressed, in an attempt to, among other objectives, interfere with the joint session's solemn constitutional duty to certify the results of the 2020 presidential election, unlawfully breached and vandalized the Capitol, injured and killed law enforcement personnel, menaced members of Congress, the Vice President, and congressional personnel, and engaged in other violent, deadly, destructive, and seditious acts. President Trump's conduct on January 6, 2021 followed his prior efforts to subvert and obstruct the certification of the results of the 2020 presidential election. Those prior efforts included a phone call on January 2, 2021, during which President Trump urged the Secretary of State of Georgia, Brad Raffensperger, to find enough votes to overturn the Georgia presidential election results, and threatened Secretary Raffensperger if he failed to do so. In all of this, President Trump gravely endangered the security of the United States and its institutions of government. He threatened the integrity of the democratic system, interfered with the peaceful transition of power, and imperiled a co-equal branch of government. He thereby betrayed his trust as president to the manifest injury of the people of the United States. Wherefore, Donald John Trump, by such conduct, has demonstrated that he will remain a threat to the national security, democracy, and the Constitution if allowed to remain in office, and has acted in a manner grossly incompatible with self-governance and the rule of law. Donald John Trump thus warrants impeachment and trial, removal from office, and disqualification to hold and enjoy any office of honor, trust, or profit under the United States.
The resolution shall be debatable for 2 hours, equally divided and controlled by the chair and the ranking minority member of the Committee on the Judiciary. The gentleman from New York, Mr. Nadler, and the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Jordan, will each control 1 hour. The chair recognizes the gentleman from New York, Mr. Nadler.
Madam Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and insert extraneous material on HRES 224.
Without objection.
Madam Speaker, I yield 1 minute to the distinguished Speaker of the House, the gentlelady from California, Ms. Pelosi.
The gentlewoman from California is yielded 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I thank the gentleman for yielding and for his leadership. Madam Speaker, in his annual address to our predecessors in Congress in 1862, President Abraham Lincoln spoke of the duty of the patriot in an hour of decisive crisis for the American people. Fellow citizens, he said, we cannot escape history. We will be remembered in spite of ourselves. No personal significance or insignificance can spare one or another of us. The fiery trial through which we pass will light us down in honor or dishonor to the latest generation. Even we here, he said, hold the power and bear the responsibility. In the Bible, St. Paul wrote, think on these things. We must think on what Lincoln told us. We, even us here, hold the power and bear the responsibility. We, you and I, hold and trust the power that derives most directly from the people of the United States. And we bear the responsibility to fill that oath that we all swear before God and before one another. The oath to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic, so help us God. We know that we faced enemies of the Constitution. We know we experienced the insurrection that violated the sanctity of the people's capital and attempted to overturn the duly recorded will of the American people. And we know that the President of the United States incited this insurrection, this armed rebellion against our common country. He must go. He is a clear and present danger to the nation that we all love. Since the presidential election in November, an election the president lost, he has repeatedly lied about the outcome, sowed self-serving doubt about democracy, and unconstitutionally sought to influence state officials to repeal reality. And then came that day of fire we all experienced. The president must be impeached, and I believe the president must be convicted by the Senate, a constitutional remedy that will ensure that the republic will be safe from this man who was so resolutely determined to tear down the things that we hold dear and that hold us together. It gives me no pleasure to say this. It breaks my heart. It should break your heart. It should break all of our hearts. For your presence in this hallowed chamber is testament to your love for our country, for America, and to your faith in the work of our founders to create a more perfect union. Those insurrectionists were not patriots. They were not part of a political base to be catered to and managed. They were domestic terrorists, and justice must prevail. But they did not appear out of a vacuum. They were sent here by the president with words such as a cry to fight like hell. Words matter. Truth matters. Accountability matters. In his public exhortations to him, the president saw the insurrectionists not as the foes of freedom, as they are, but as a means to a terrible goal, the goal of his personally clinging to power, the goal of thwarting the will of the people, the goal of ending in a fiery and bloody clash nearly 2.5 centuries of our democracy. This is not theoretical, and this is not motivated by partisanship. I stand before you today as an officer of the Constitution, a Speaker of the House of Representatives. I stand before you as a wife, a mother, a grandmother, a daughter whose father proudly served in this Congress, Thomas D'Alessandro Jr. from Maryland, one of the first Italian Americans to serve in the Congress. And I stand here before you today as the noblest of things, a citizen of the United States of America. With my voice and my vote, with a plea to all of you, Democrats and Republicans, I ask you to search your souls and answer these questions. Is the president's war on democracy in keeping with the Constitution? Were his words an insurrectionary mob a high crime and misdemeanor? Do we not have the duty to our oath to do all we constitutionally can to protect our nation and our democracy from the appetites and ambitions of a man who has self-evidently demonstrated that he is a vital threat to liberty, to self-government, and to the rule of law? Our country is divided. We all know that. There are lies abroad in the land spread by a desperate president who feels his power slipping away. We know that too. But I know this as well, that we here in this House have a sacred obligation to stand for truth, to stand up for the Constitution, to stand as guardians of the Republic. In a speech he was prepared to give in Dallas on Friday, November 22nd, 1963, President John F. Kennedy was to say, "We in this country, in this generation, are, by destiny rather than choice, the watchmen on the walls of world freedom. We ask, therefore, that we may be worthy of our power and responsibility." That we may be worthy. President Kennedy was assassinated before he could deliver those words to the nation, but they resonate more even now, in our time, in this place. Let us be worthy of our power and responsibility, that what Lincoln thought was the world's last best hope, the United States of America, may long survive. My fellow members, my fellow Americans, we cannot escape history. Let us embrace our duty, fulfill our oath, and honor the trust of our nation. And we pray that God will continue to bless America. I thank you, Madam Speaker, and yield back.
The gentleman from New York reserves. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman's recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. 19 minutes. 19 minutes. 4 years ago on Inauguration Day, January 20th, 2017, 19 minutes into President Trump's administration, at 12:19 p.m., the Washington Post headline was, "Campaign to impeach President Trump has begun." And now, with just 1 week left, they're still trying. In 7 days, there will be a peaceful transfer of power, just like there has been every other time in our country. But Democrats are going to impeach President Trump again. This doesn't unite the country. There's no way this helps the nation deal with the tragic and terrible events of last week that we all condemn. And Republicans have been consistent. We've condemned all the violence all the time. We condemned it last summer. We condemned it last week. We should be focused on bringing the nation together. Instead, Democrats are going to impeach the president for a second time 1 week before he leaves office. Why? Why? Politics and the fact that they want to cancel the president. The president who cut taxes, the president who reduced regulations, the president prior to COVID had the greatest economy, lowest unemployment in 50 years, the president who got us out of the Iran deal, put the embassy in Jerusalem, brought hostages home from North Korea, put 3 great justices on the Supreme Court, gave us a new NAFTA agreement, the Abraham Accords, the COVID vaccine, and who built the wall. It's about politics. This is about getting the president of the United States. They spied on his campaign before he was elected. 19 minutes into his presidency, they started the impeachment push. 3-year Mueller investigation, 19 lawyers, 40 agents, 500 witnesses, 2,500 subpoenas, $40 million to find nothing. Impeachment round 1 based on an anonymous whistleblower with no firsthand knowledge who was biased against the president and who worked for Joe Biden. And now it's impeachment round 2. It's always been about getting the president no matter what. It's an obsession that is now broadened. It's not just about impeachment anymore, it's about canceling, as I've said. Canceling the president and anyone that disagrees with them. The Ayatollah can tweet, the president can't. Democrats can object on January 6, 2017, but Republicans aren't allowed to object on January 6, 2021. Democrats say Antifa is a myth. Republicans condemn all violence all the time. The double standard has to stop. And frankly, the attack on the First Amendment has to stop. And stop and think about it. Do you have a functioning First Amendment when the cancel culture only allows one side to talk? When you can't even have a debate in this country, this great country, the greatest country ever? It needs to stop, because if it continues, it won't just be Republicans who get canceled. It won't just be the President of the United States. The cancel culture will come for us all. America's a great country, the greatest country ever. It seems to me that we need to think about how great the people of this nation really are. Think about what we've accomplished in the past and begin to come together as leaders who represent so many great folks across our districts. Think about this. Think about this. In 1903, in Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, 2 guys fly this thing they called a plane 100 feet. Barely got off the ground. Barely got off the ground. Amazing thing. 44 years later, Chuck Yeager breaks the sound barrier. In 44 years, we go from 2 guys flying a contraption they called a plane a few hundred feet to Chuck Yeager breaking the sound barrier. And 22 years after that, another American steps on the moon. Think about it. In one lifetime, in 66 years, 2 guys flying 100 feet to putting a man on the moon. That's what this country is capable of. That's what we can do. And we, as the Congress who represent the people who did that, should start leading. should start understanding what really is going on here. So I hope we defeat this. I hope we can begin to come together and recognize the greatness of the American people and focus on the things they want us to focus on. I yield back our time.
Gentleman reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I yield myself 3 minutes.
Gentleman from New York is recognized for 3 minutes.
Madam Speaker, we all saw it coming. Months in advance, President Trump was baselessly and deliberately whipping his supporters into a frenzy. Weeks before the riot, he used his bully pulpit to spread lies about the election. He told his supporters that the results were fraudulent. He implored them again and again to help him stay in power. And he convinced them that accepting the outcome of the election posed an existential threat to their families and their freedoms. We have a duty to observe, Madam Speaker, that racism played a direct role in this incitement. The President's violent rhetoric is always at its most fevered pitch when he is talking about the civil rights and civic aspirations of Black Americans and other minority communities. On January 6th, at a rally that was large, angry, and widely reported to be armed, the President's lies and violent rhetoric reached their crescendo. At that rally, the President took the stage. After reiterating the falsehood that we won this election, and we won it by a landslide, he told the crowd that if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore. And then he urged the mob to walk down Pennsylvania Avenue to prevent the Congress from confirming the election of an illegitimate president. On that day, President Trump unleashed the force of a mob on this, the People's House. He encouraged that attack with the explicit intent to disrupt the joint session of Congress, an attack that threatened the safety of the Vice President, the Speaker of the House, and the President pro tem of the Senate, the next three officers in the line of succession. And look at what that violence has wrought. At least 6 dead, offices ransacked, the sanctity of our Capitol breached for the first time in 2 centuries. Our hallways littered with broken glass, the battle flags of a long-dead Confederacy, and the debris we have come to associate with the Trump campaign. Madam Speaker, I have faith in the resiliency of our government. We will bring the rioters to justice. Their accomplices in this House will be held responsible. But today, we must focus on the gravest threat first. President Trump, who incited this riot and who remains a grave danger to the nation. As we warned the Senate when we tried him for his first impeachment, President Trump has made clear in word and deed that he will persist in such conduct if he is not removed from power. He poses a continuing threat to our nation, to the integrity of our elections, and to our democratic order. He must not remain in power one moment longer. Not one moment longer. The danger is too great. We must impeach. I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves the balance of his time. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from California, Mr. McClellan.
The gentleman from California is recognized for 2 minutes. The gentleman from California is recognized for 2 minutes.
We'll go 4 minutes. Excuse me. I didn't realize that.
The gentleman from Ohio, in control of the time on that side of the aisle, wishes to yield 4 minutes to the gentleman from California. Correct?
Yes.
The gentleman from California is recognized for 4 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. You know, I didn't like the President's speech on January 6th either. I thought he was wrong to assert that the Vice President in Congress can pick and choose which electoral votes to count. He was wrong to set such a confrontational tone in a politically tense situation. But what did he actually say? His exact words were, quote, "I know that everyone here will soon be marching over to the Capitol building to peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard," unquote. That's impeachable? That's called freedom of speech. Now, he also threatened to oppose candidates in future elections. And by the way, that was directed at Republicans like me who'd resolved to uphold the constitutional process and protect the Electoral College. Well, so what? That's called politics. If we impeached every politician who gave a fiery speech to a crowd of partisans, this Capitol would be deserted. That's what the president did. That is all he did. He specifically told the crowd to protest peacefully and patriotically, and the vast majority of them did. But every movement has a lunatic fringe. Suppressing free speech is not the answer. Holding rioters accountable for their actions is the answer. And we are. And if we'd prosecuted BLM and Antifa rioters across the country with the same determination these last 6 months, this incident may not have happened at all. Now, short of declaring war, the power of impeachment is the most solemn and consequential act that Congress can take. To use it in this manner, in the heat of the moment, with no hearings, no due process, many members phoning in their votes after a hastily called debate, exactly 1 week before a new president is to take office, trivializes this power to the point of caricature. The Democrats have won everything in sight: the House, the Senate, and the presidency. In a republic, that calls for magnanimity by the victors. Only in a banana republic does it call for vengeance. Benjamin Franklin warned us that passion governs, and she never governs wisely. In our passions this week, we've set some dangerous new precedents that will haunt us for years to come. Yesterday, we redefined intemperate speech as a physical incapacity requiring removal from office. Today, we define it as a high crime and misdemeanor. Well, the moment any member of this body gives an impassioned speech and the lunatic fringe of their movement takes license from it, be prepared to answer to this new precedent that we established today. Now, I could cite plenty of provocative speeches made by Democrats that directly preceded violence this summer, but we've already had enough of that. You know, after 600,000 Americans had perished in the Civil War, Abraham Lincoln appealed to the better angels of our nature. He said, "With malice toward none, with charity for all, let us bind up the nation's wounds." Those words were so important to the unity of our nation, they're inscribed in marble at the Lincoln Memorial. I cannot think of a more petty, vindictive, and gratuitous act than to impeach an already defeated president a week before he is to leave office. President-elect Biden's promise to heal the nation becomes a hollow mockery in the harsh reality of this unconstitutional act. God help our country.
Has expired.
Good job, Tommy.
The gentleman from Ohio reserves.
Reserve.
The gentleman from New York is recognized.
And now yield 1 minute to the gentlelady from California, Ms. Lofgren.
The gentlewoman from California is recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, I'm the only member of Congress who's been involved in all 3 of the last presidential impeachments. Those were long proceedings. Today, we don't need a long investigation to know the president incited right-wing terrorists to attack the Congress to try to overturn constitutional government. The actions were in public, plain as day. His actions are the most serious offense against our Constitution and our country. They are impeachable acts. The founders devised the impeachment clause to protect against a president who would threaten constitutional order. If we don't act now, the impeachment clause would essentially be meaningless. Faced with these facts, if we don't impeach to protect our country, we will fail our own oath to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and, yes, domestic. We have no choice. We must impeach.
Time has expired.
God bless America.
The gentleman from New York reserves.
I reserve.
The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Biggs.
The gentleman from Arizona is recognized for 2 minutes.
It is with wariness and a certain unhealthy, morbid curiosity that I watch the beast attempt to devour President Donald J. Trump again. The craving to crush President Trump has never been satisfied, not through investigations, not through false allegations, and not even through an impeachment that was wholly without merit. And the timing of this impeachment makes little sense. Your candidate will take office in a few hours, and President Trump will relinquish the levers of power to President-elect Biden. But your craving was never a Biden victory, nor was it even a Trump defeat. You believe that your hunger will be finally satiated by impeaching this president without completion of his full term of office. You don't merely seek victory, but you seek obliteration of your nemesis. The thirst for Trump's destruction will not be slaked, however, even if you're successful today and were the Senate to convict President Trump. Yours will be a Pyrrhic victory, for instead of stopping the Trump train, his movement will grow stronger, for you will have made him a martyr. Surely you are aware of this, and that is why your allies in the media seek to censor conservative voices. Your chums that sit on the boards of corporate America, yes, the same companies that the left vilifies, promise to starve Republicans from receiving their PAC donations. But I bet that the groundswell of support for President Trump and his policies will not go away. You see, the movement he started is based on building an incredibly robust economy on a foundation of lower taxes and fewer regulations that has the wonderful effect of putting more people to work than ever. It is built upon a strong military that is extricated from endless wars. It provides border security, America First trade agreements, Mideast peace and stability. Those are the things the American people want. Your four-year appetite will be temporarily assuaged, while you will no doubt continue to chase after leaders of this movement. But your appetite will be unfulfilled. I urge you, please do not, and I'm mixing metaphors here, attempt to douse the remaining burning embers of this movement with gasoline. No one wants that. I urge you, please, to reconsider the reckless action in which you engaged today.
The gentleman's time has
I yield.
expired. The gentleman from Ohio reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I now yield 1 minute to the gentleman from California, Mr. Schiff.
The gentleman from California is recognized for 1 minute.
1 week ago, the President incited an insurrection against Congress to prevent the peaceful transition of power. It was the most dangerous moment for our democracy in a century. Today, we invoke the remedy the founders provided for just such a lawless president, impeachment. More important, today we begin the long road to restoration. America has been through a civil war, world wars, a Great Depression, pandemics, McCarthyism, and now a Trumpist and white nationalist insurrection. And yet our democracy endures. It endures because at every juncture, every pivotal moment, when evil threatened to overtake good, patriotic Americans step forward to say enough. This is one of those moments. To preserve this sacred place, this citadel of democracy for ourselves and for posterity, let us say enough. Enough. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from New York reserves. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Gohmert.
The gentleman from Texas is recognized for 2 minutes.
Here's a quote. I just don't even know why there aren't more uprisings all over the country, and maybe there will be. Or, sadly, the domestic enemies of our voting system and honoring our Constitution are right at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue with their allies in Congress of the United States. We were called enemies of the state. Those are all quotes from our speaker. Now, on our side, we didn't take those to be impeachable because we didn't believe she surely meant that. But by the Democrats taking this action, you're telling me, no, when we say those, we actually mean to incite violence. That's what this action is saying. Look, I just looked on the History Channel. It says these words: if the Judiciary Committee, talking about impeachment, finds sufficient grounds, its members write and pass articles of impeachment, which then go to the full House for a vote. Half of all the impeachments ever conducted, ever voted for, occurred under this speaker. You're setting a precedent that says very clearly, because this impeachment isn't going to work, but it is setting the precedent. Unlike a year ago when we said, look, it shouldn't go through Intel, it should go through Judiciary Committee. Forget that. Now the message is, if you have a whim and you want to just go after a president, Just go straight to the floor. No investigation, no Judiciary Committee. Go straight to the floor. Use it as a political weapon as you wish. This is so dangerous, what you're doing. Forgetting all the precedents. Yes, we can argue back and forth, but you're using this as a weapon, and you're destroying this little experiment in self-government. In a year's time,
The gentleman's time has expired.
it needs
The
to
gentleman
stop. I yield back.
The gentleman from Ohio reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I now yield 1 minute to the distinguished gentlelady from Massachusetts, Ms. Clark.
The gentlewoman from Massachusetts is recognized for 1 minute.
Suffragist and abolitionist Lucy Stone stated, "If we speak the truth fearlessly, we shall add to our number those who will turn the scale to the side of equal and full justice in all things." The truth is, President Trump incited a violent attack against the United States